I'm Megan Carpenter, and I'm your didactic presenter today. I'm a research fellow at Clemson University, and I support the Behavior Alliance of South Carolina. So today I'm here to talk more in our series about empowering educators by elevating student success with function-based thinking. So our main objectives for today are to name and identify common barriers to function-based thinking, mainly mismatched function. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means and identify alternative reinforcers that match the function of the behavior. So we'll start with a review of function-based thinking, talk about the common functions of behavior, a little review of reinforcement, and then how we match that function to that reinforcement. So first, just review of what is function-based thinking. So if you weren't able to attend one of our previous trainings on function-based thinking, there is an asynchronous module that we have set up so you can have all this background knowledge on function-based thinking. But for today's purposes, I'm just going to go through a real quick overview of what is function-based thinking. So it's basically a quick systematic way of thinking that informs our selection of function-based supports. We primarily use function-based thinking for students with low-level behavior, so students who engage in persistent but minor behaviors, such as off-task behavior. We're not going to use function-based thinking for students who engage in behaviors who are a danger to themselves or others. In that case, we're going to look at a full functional behavior assessment to understand the purposes behind that behavior. This is developed to be used by classroom teachers who are directly supporting students and with input from families and the individual themselves. When we use function-based thinking, our purpose is to understand the purpose of contextually inappropriate behaviors, the situations in which they're likely to occur, and the potential reasons or functions of that behavior. This allows us to be able to adjust the environment, like the antecedent conditions, and provide reinforcement that aligns to the function of that behavior. So just go ahead and think, what are some potential barriers to function-based thinking? One barrier we know that exists is that when supports such as reinforcement aren't aligned to the function, behavior supports are just not going to be as effective. So it's important, once we identify the function, that we think about how we're going to align supports. Just a quick review of reinforcement when we look at positive reinforcement is when we add a pleasant stimulus to increase a behavior. So this is when the student engages in that appropriate behavior or replacement behavior. Instead of the challenging behavior, we give them something that is going to increase the likelihood that they engage in that appropriate behavior again in the future. Negative reinforcement still increases the likelihood that a student will engage in behavior, but is by taking something away. So for example, if we know a student engages in challenging behavior to escape their task demands, right? If they engage in that behavior of starting the work independently, we go over and cross off the last 3 problems, say you don't have to do these because you've started your work so nicely and appropriately, right? We're using negative reinforcement to increase the likelihood that they will engage in the behavior of completing the work independently in the future. So think about some of the reinforcers that you currently use with your students. What are they? Sometimes we hear this, that I'm doing reinforcement, but it isn't working. Usually that's a result that of the function and the reinforcement not matching well. In order to be reinforcing, we must match that function. So remember, as a quick review, the functions of behavior in general are to either obtain something or escape or avoid something. So either obtain something, it could be attention, maybe peer attention, adult attention, tangibles, maybe there's something they really like. Maybe it's something such as the computer time or an iPad. It could be a specific activity, or it can be some type of sensory input. So they're trying to get the feeling of something or the way something looks or the way something sounds, that they want that. Alternatively, students may engage in behavior to escape or avoid something. That could be attention. Maybe they don't want the teacher's attention or they don't want peer attention. So they engage in challenging behavior to escape that. Maybe they're trying to escape or avoid demands, which we see in schools not infrequently, that students just don't really want to do that task that we're asking them to do and trying to escape or avoid that. Alternatively, they could be trying to escape those sensory stimulations. So the way something feels or looks or sounds, and it's just too much and they don't want that. So we look at our functions of behavior with, go back to looking at obtain, so either attention, tangibles, or sensory. We have powerful reinforcers that are pretty common within classrooms that we can use to align to these functions. So for our students that engaging in challenging behavior to obtain attention, when they're engaging in appropriate behavior, we can engage in verbal praise or give them eye contact. Even sometimes we forget that even that reprimand or redirection can also be attention. So we have to be careful about that as well. We can also look at tangibles for a student who's trying to obtain tangibles. Like, what is it that they want? Let's help them get that in a more socially appropriate way. And we can do the same thing with sensory. We can also match our reinforcement when a student engages in escape behaviors to escape or avoid situations such as attention. So we can allow that student to escape to a part of the room where there's less people when they ask appropriately or engage in the contextually desired behavior. We can, if a student is trying to avoid their task, if they're trying to avoid their work, we can provide assistance with difficult tasks to make that demand less, or we can build in breaks or have the student learn to ask appropriately for breaks and honor those requests. We can also help a student avoid sensory by giving them things like headphones in a really loud environment to help them avoid that in a more appropriate way than maybe their challenging behavior is. So I'm going to give you an example of a time when I was teaching and I struggled a bit to match that reinforcement to that functional behavior and how it worked out. So I was working with a student, Aiden. He was a second grader. And when he was asked to complete reading comprehension tasks, he would repeatedly ask for his sister or pretend to call his dad on a calculator to tell his dad he wasn't doing his work. And it often resulted in him not completing his work or not completing as much of his work. So this was a lower level behavior, right? He's not a danger to himself or others. He's repeatedly asking for things or pretending to call his dad. He's not engaged, he's off task, but this wasn't a behavior that was a danger to himself or others. But it was a concern because he's not completing as much of his reading comprehension tasks. So after taking data, I realized that the function was to escape task demands. So I set up a little token board where he earned a token for completing each problem, and he got his handy dandy notebook and his green crayon, which were his two favorite things to play with during free time. But this didn't really work for Aiden because I didn't consider the function of his behavior when determining that reinforcer. It's something he liked, but when we look at the function of his behavior was to escape task demands, I need to align the function to what the task demands were. So with the second triad intervention, we set the system that if he completed half the assignment quietly, then he would not have to complete the rest of the assignment. And that was definitely successful for him. We saw him engaging more consistently in comprehension tasks, and we were able to build up where he was completing 2/3 of the assignment, and then all the assignments except the last question, right? And while he was still completing his work, and he wasn't engaging in those challenging behaviors or those contextually inappropriate behaviors of asking for his sister repeatedly or pretending to call his dad using the calculator. So we think of some other situations on how we can match that function to the reinforcement to the function. So when a teacher calls, here in this example, a teacher calls on Marcus to read aloud, he screams, she sends to the office, he continues to scream and read aloud. So if we think about the function of that behavior that Marcus is displaying, we see that it's to avoid reading tasks. So when we look at potential reinforcers, we can consider things like stickers or candy, but that doesn't really match the function of avoid reading. Verbal praise, again, he's still not getting to avoid reading, or a short break or an option to skip a turn. He's asked to read aloud. Turn reading aloud when he asks appropriately. That matches the function. So if instead of screaming, Marcus says, "I'd like a break, please," or "Can I skip my turn, please?" and we allow him to skip his turn reading aloud, we allow him to avoid that reading, that reinforcer is much more likely to be successful for that student. Let's look at another example. So in this example, when working independently, Kayla completes her work, but cries until the teacher comes over. So for this student, when we look at the possible functions, we see that her behavior is likely, she's engaging in this crying behavior to obtain teacher attention. So we look at potential reinforcers. We could look at earning a break, but again, she's not getting teacher attention for that. We could look at earning computer time, but again, she's not earning attention for that as well. But we look at verbal praise for completing her work without crying, and that gets her the teacher attention that she wants, and she is displaying her contextually inappropriate behavior to get. In our third example, we see that when it's loud in the cafeteria, Kelly leaves the cafeteria without asking. However, he stays when the cafeteria is quiet. So when we consider possible functions, we would go through the function-based thinking process. We see that Kelly likely engages in this behavior of leaving the area without asking to escape that sensory stimulation or that noise. So when we look at matching the function of his behavior to a potential reinforcer, we could have him earn a break when completing work. And that's not really appropriate because there's no work in the cafeteria. We could allow him to sit with a preferred peer, and that doesn't allow him to escape that noise. Or A, allow Kelly to leave the cafeteria when he asks, which yes, this would allow him to escape in a more appropriate way. We'd also know where he is, so we're not worried that we don't know where Kelly is. So if we allow him to leave when he asks, it's one, more contextually appropriate because we know where he is, and two, we can match that function of his challenging behavior to escaping those loud noises in the cafeteria. So just go ahead and think, what are some potential reinforcers for attention maintained behavior? Remember, things like traditional point charts or extra computer time or tangibles a student can earn are not reinforcing necessarily for students who display attention maintained behaviors. So extra teacher time, lunch with the teacher, quick check-ins with the teacher, extra praise, those would be potential reinforcers for attention maintained behavior. What about escape maintained behavior? So when we look at escape maintained behavior, that's things like allowing a student to take a break, allowing them to sit in a quieter area of the classroom, right? That allows them to escape in a contextually appropriate way. So a few quick takeaways from this today. Different things are going to be reinforcing for different students and for different behaviors in different contexts. Reinforcement must match the function of the behavior. Intangible reinforcers such as computer time, stickers, or candy may not be reinforcing for all students. If the reinforcer doesn't match the function, we may not see a change in the behavior. But I challenge you to think about different reinforcers you can use for students who display behavior of various function, and what is one new reinforcer you can implement in your classroom tomorrow. This is within that slide deck that was shared with you. There are some additional resources. There are some charts that list out some different potential reinforcers for students based on the function of the behavior within our function-based thinking guide. So be sure to check out pages 26 through 28. And in addition, there is this article on function-based intervention, functional assessment-based interventions when we focus on context and considering function, which will help you kind of think through that process of identifying appropriate reinforcers that match the function of the behavior. So these are straight from that article, so be sure to check that out. I appreciate your time today. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Have a great rest of your day.